Listeners, welcome back. It's once again time for my yoga audio, and I'm your host, Megan Morgan. And I am already grinning ear to ear because I have the specialist guest of all. And I know I say that almost every time, but I'm so proud to introduce my sister, Cecelia Bolden, to you all today. She
Hi.
She's here joining us from Chicago in the Midwest. And as most of you know, I'm here on the West Coast. And Cecelia is a faithful, talented, ambitious, and hardworking person that believes in service to humankind. She completed her executive MBA last May of 2022 at the University of Notre Dame through the Mendoza College of Business. And before that, many years ago, around the same time Richard and I met in college, she attended Wesleyan. So, Cecelia, thank you so much for joining us on the show today and making the time out of all the hundreds of thousands of things you do in the world to be with us and share a little bit about the work you're doing in the world.
Well, thanks for having me. Like I was telling you earlier, I was bragging how I was going to be on my sister's podcast because I think that's totally cool. So I'm so glad to be here and, to share parts of our story, right? I mean, life is short and we all have gifts and times and treasures, and you're one of mine. And so I'm sorry it took me so long for us to get time to figure out how we could do this. Maybe that means we're too busy, but it's really I've been looking forward to it. So this is a highlight of totally my whole day, my whole month. Dare I say whole year, even though we're just in March. But yeah.
But it encompasses a lot, I feel like, about our relationship. For listeners, we did not grow up together. We discovered each other. I was doing the math the other day. 21 years ago was when we met for the first time.
Oh,
Yeah, I flew to Chicago on a whim. We'd been in touch, but we hadn't met. I flew to Chicago, and Cecelia and her husband and daughter welcomed me with open arms, and we got to know one another. And she toured me all around the city of Chicago, which is amazing, as you know, for art and culture and food. And we just had so many Christmases and Easter and
yep.
visits and forth. We were living in Canada at the time. And so we've built this kind of long distance relationship, but whenever we get together, it's like it's been 5 minutes. We just jump
Right.
in, and there's not enough time to talk about all
I
the
know,
things.
right? It was like trying to get everything in every minute. But it's really funny. The closest people to me, um, that's how my relationships are. Because, as we all know, as you get older, life seems to get complicated, right? And you get caught up, and you don't mean to forget people, but you just get caught up in life. So the closest people to me never say, you never call me. We just pick up where we left off and we keep going because we recognize, right? Whatever each we were doing before, it had per se nothing to do with my not thinking about people. So I have a very small group of very close friends, but we all interact that same way. And you are so amazing. And what I remember about that visit when we were talking, even though we didn't grow up together, we did a lot of the same things at the same age. Like when we talked about cutting our hair and stuff, like you did that, and we would just laugh. Like it's almost like twinning, right? When people say, they're just something, and we were just laughing because literally cutting hair was just the primary example that stuck out because we both had really, mine is a little shorter and I'm a little older, so it's a little different, but just there were just so many things, and we'd say things and repeat things. It's just really ironic when people talk about nurture versus nature. There are just some things that are just inherent, and I think we're a prime example of that. So it's pretty cool.
We were chuckling I don't know if it was last weekend or the weekend before, and we were talking with Curtis, your husband,
Mhm.
on FaceTime, and Malcolm came into the room and
Oh,
talking about how Avery, your daughter, and Jesha, my daughter, are born literally like 3 weeks apart. It's
yep.
a month, like same year, same time, like.
Exactly. Right. So it was inevitable, even though we didn't grow up together, that our paths there were just too many things that were in alignment. So, and as I've told you several times, I am a believer that things do happen for a reason when they're supposed to happen. As much as we plan and think we're in control of our lives, right? There are just things that have to happen, I think. So,
Oh,
yeah.
it was destined destined to happen, and I'm so so glad that it did, and grateful. And
So I want to tell you a little secret.
okay.
Malcolm's like, Auntie Megan's so cool, Mom, after the call. So yeah, she's so nice. I'm like, right, nicer than Mom, right? So yeah, but he said that unprompted. He was like smiling. So I don't know what you said, but he was like, oh my God, she's so cool and so nice, which I thought was so sweet. So
We're just talking about music. We're talking about Prince. Kurt was going through his albums, and we were looking at artwork, and yeah, he just came in and joined the conversation. And he wasn't what impressed me so much. I know with teens, like they never want to talk to anybody on the phone, especially like a fake. He hasn't seen
right,
in many years in person.
right.
But Kurt just handed him the phone, and he was just like sat down in the chair and chatted with me. And that's a lot of teenagers would be like, absolutely.
Uh, right. I'm not doing this exactly. Yep, yep.
They're living their lives. So kudos to you both for raising
Oh,
such wonderful
thanks,
beings. And
thanks.
as you kind of we were talking about your MBA, and so you've gone back to school in, I'll say, the middle years. So when I was looking at your
Yeah.
interview that you did with I think it was Notre Dame magazine, and you were saying like everybody has this thing, oh, you're too old to go back to school, but you had a great experience, I think.
Yeah, Notre Dame, I can't even say enough. Like I get such a warm feeling in my heart whenever I think about it because how they embraced me. I going to get my advanced degree was something I always wanted to do, but life happened, right? As it always does. And time it just never seemed to work out. And the timing was great for this. And I was actually supposed to be part of a different class, but as you know, my mom passed away as a result of COVID. And what I will never forget what Notre Dame said to me. I said, I can't. They said, let me just tell you, don't even say anything. We will be waiting for you when you're ready. I was like, oh, okay. I mean, all they knew about me was my interview and my application, but they confirmed that that was the right place to be because they saw me as a person, right? And they cared about me as a person. Obviously, they want their students to do well, and you have to work hard, but they saw me, right? And I don't know a lot of places that would do that. And so got into the class, and because of COVID, the class was half the size. Normally they're like 54. We had 27 because we had a cohort in Chicago and there was a cohort in South Bend. But the cohort in South Bend had the advantage of the university and multiple classes, where in Chicago, we kind of had one main auditorium. So they wanted to make sure we were apart. And they did a really good job with maintaining the COVID protocol. And I could say no one in our cohort caught COVID from one another. If anything, they caught it from outside if they were going to work. So in that 17-month period, we did not catch COVID from one another. And we were in person every other Friday and Saturday for 17 months. Right.
Just goes to show.
So, yeah. Yes, exactly. I mean, they really took the time to be sure that we were comfortable, that we were in an environment in that we did not fear getting sick, and then that kind of edged into the learning process. They really looked after us and protected us, which I think should be highlighted because I don't know of any other university that took that kind of care and kept the program going. But for them, being in person was important. That was one of the strong points of their program, and I agree. And they totally rose to the occasion in all aspects.
I believe it. I know towards the end of your program, you came into like a personal family situation where again they showed that they were behind you 100%.
Yeah, I couldn't believe the stuff that happened, right? But like I said, life happens, and you don't know. And Megan and I were talking about this, and in November, as we were trying to go towards finals, normally the families get together and things like that. But I said, oh my God, I have so much work. I can't. And it was probably the first Thanksgiving, definitely since I've been married, that I wasn't with my husband, with my family, but I needed to do this. I felt lonely, but I just said, you know what, this is quiet time. Things are kind of quiet at work, and I could really be about studying. And don't you know, right after my husband and son got back, my husband got sick and had to be hospitalized right during the week of finals. And I was like literally in shock. But again, the university said, look, family first. We'll figure out all this other stuff because it's not going to go anywhere. You're just about through with the program. We'll figure it out. So they allowed me the grace to focus on what I needed to focus on, which was my life partner, right? And making sure he was okay and making sure the doctors were taking the care of him that he should. And so they made an accommodation. And fortunately, my husband got better, and I didn't have to defer. I was able to take my finals the week after my husband got out of the hospital. So I stayed on track with the rest of my class. But again, that was Notre Dame. They didn't have to, but they did it because, again, they saw me as the person, right? And valued what I brought to the class and didn't want a life situation, which is an important situation for me, not to address that appropriately because they saw that that would take away from what I could even put on paper, right? They wanted my mind to be where it needed to be at the time it needed to be. So I can't ever thank them enough for that. And again, another way of highlighting how phenomenal a program it is. Really phenomenal of a program.
It's really, when I think about it, it's the way that life should be, that our schools, our employers, our organizations should always see that. But we know
Right.
that it's not the case everywhere, right? Where
Yeah.
people
Right.
choose
Right.
and I'm just so thankful, that intervention was there for you all to get through that situation.
Right.
So
Right.
challenging because you met at Wesleyan, right? And where is Wesleyan? I'm not as
It's in Middletown, Connecticut.
oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Sometimes people say Wellesley. I'm like, no, it's also not Ohio Wesleyan, or there are quite a few Wesleyans throughout the US. This is the first settlement that John Wesley, who I believe he was a Protestant, I believe he's a Protestant priest, he found Wesleyan. So it is the first Wesleyan. It's in Middletown, Connecticut, which is, for those that may not know where Middletown is, it's about 20, I think 20 minutes north of Yale.
Oh,
So
okay.
New Haven. So it's just up the road. So a great institution. It's a small. It's often affectionately called a small Ivy.
Mhm.
2,700 students, I believe. And it was where I met my life partner, met some phenomenal people, experienced so many wonderful things in my life, right? It's there that I pledged a sorority, so I kind of figured out what that meant. Um, Folks from all over the world, though there were quite a few people when I was in school that were from like the New York, New Jersey, that kind of area. But just vibrant. And that, if you will, that was the height of apartheid. So we did a lot of protesting and things like that. So I kind of got my first taste and understanding of the role I play in my citizenry, right? And what I had the power to do. And so that was a phenomenal experience too, to be tied together with folks that really wanted to make a difference and make their voice heard about something that was horrible, that was just unjust and not right, and there was a gentleman who, I believe he was from South Africa. His first name was Isaac, and he was a senior at the time. So he was able to provide us with a lot of perspective of what he experienced growing up
Mhm.
and how heinous apartheid was, and what we could do here in the US to help turn the tide on that. So we were fortunate that Isaac was there during that time as well.
Oh,
So
incredible.
yeah, yeah.
There's a former guest who's been on the show, Kule Gabodo. She's from South Africa, and I was introduced to her by another guest who went to grad school with her. She went to one of the very first schools that was integrated in South Africa after apartheid.
Wow. Wow.
This show, and she was just like, she said they were not even. It was like, well, the law changed, and it sounds great, but then there was no prep. There was no plan. So she's like,
Right.
you up, and the other kids are looking at you, and the other teachers are looking, and you know what, there is a
Right.
lot that we can learn.
Right. That goes into it. It's like, okay, we get it, it no longer is legal, but okay, what's this new infrastructure look like? Right? What's this new mindset? What are these now have proven to be falsehoods
Mhm.
about how and what people have the capacity to learn, right? I can only I can only imagine those that were the oppressors as well as those that were oppressed. Now you have permission to occupy the same space, right? There's just a lot of psychology there behind that, right? And if you will, unwinding and undoing and things that people were told all their lives that were lies. And now you're a teacher in a classroom teaching the very people that you were told shouldn't be treated like people. That's I admire the fact that it was broken down and that people were willing to engage. And to be honest, I think here in the US we could learn a lot from that process, you know. So but yeah, so that it was I just learned at Wesleyan a lot about me and what I must do
Mm.
here. When in the room, at the table, speak up, right? Just, you may never be in that position again. So to walk away, even if that may mean you may not come out on the nice side of that conversation, but and easier said than done for sure, not for the faint of heart at all, but I do believe that we're all put on this earth to do something, right? And not everybody may understand the greatness of you or the goodness of you, but you do, right? And how much you have in your bank account does not determine your value as a person, right? The fact that you may disagree with someone is okay, but you respect the fact that you disagree. That's okay. That's part of the human condition, right? We're all different. We've all had different experiences, but respect is important. Hate, there's no place for hatred.
Mhm.
If we are going to survive and thrive as a society and grow and be healthy, you need people with all different points of view. It's a beautiful thing. It really, really is because how nice is it to talk to people where even if you don't agree, you're listening, right? It's so great. It's so great. So,
I was listening to an interview on my walk this morning with Rick Rubin, who's like the founder of Def Jam Records and discovered the Beastie Boys and
uh, yeah, yeah,
but he's just kind of this magician. He's not really like I'm not even finished the interview yet. It's kind of long, but it was so good. And anyway, one of the things that stood out to me in the interview is he said people are not used to being listened to. So he was challenging people to say, like, the next time you're talking with somebody, like, really pay attention and listen to that person. We've probably seen the quote floating around on the internet. We all listen to respond instead of like we're thinking about
ooh,
what we're going to say next.
right, exactly.
When you listen to someone, it changes that experience for that person. Because if they realize they're really being heard, then their whole demeanor changes, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Listening.
What
That
a
was
man.
that you.
What it shouldn't be a novel concept, but it is, right? Because if you really think about what he said, he's like, we all do that, right? Because you think you know what the person's going to say, so you're like, rather than hearing what they're saying, whatever that first word was, you're like, I know what I'm going to say, and you don't hear the rest of whatever, and people can pick up on that, and more people should listen to that. You may have to tell me what the name of that because I totally agree. The world, can you imagine? Can you imagine? It like gives me goosepimples just thinking about how different things might be
Mhm.
if we did that. Something so simple that we're all empowered to do now. That's the other thing, right? It's not a superpower or anything like that. It's just kind of being quiet. We have one mouth and two ears, right? It's for a reason. So just saying.
He just wrote a book. I think it's called Be Creative. I'll find it.
Okay.
I was like, oh, I'm gonna have to read that now because I'm
Right.
with this. this bit. One thing I wanted to ask you about, because I know I love how much work you do in community, which you mentioned got started at Wesleyan, right? Getting started with your sorority sisters, having a seat at the table, learning about apartheid. And even though we're a few years apart, I had that same experience in Canada. I remember seeing this ad on the television for Sun City, and I was like, oh,
Mm,
that's what is that? And then students were protesting, and I was talking to them about it, and ended up taking courses in sociology and anthropology at the time was how I could learn about South Africa. But
right,
how that's translated, like you're now did I write this down properly? Chief experience officer at
right, right, right,
and really working a lot in the equity, diversity, and inclusion sphere at work, but like also in your off time. And you were telling me earlier about just some like two, I think it was just like two of the things you're working on, both personally and professional, um, in that realm. I don't know if you want to share any highlights
right.
of that.
Yeah, work, it's been great. My background is in IT,
Mhm.
which, you know, not to tell my age, but back in the day, there were no such things as computer science degrees, none of that kind of stuff. And IT was in its infancy, relatively speaking. And real short, I was a senior in college, and I was fortunate that a lot of the big, what we call Simpsons integrators, came to campus. And I remember interviewing with two partners from one of the large firms, who I won't name their names, but people who are in this business who are listening to podcasts probably know what I'm talking about. So one partner was what on the audit side, pretty obvious accounting. Okay, that might be interesting, and they would put you through a master's program so you can get a master's in accounting. That sounds pretty good, and they'll put you through training. And the other partner was part of this. He called it consulting. I'm like, okay, I have no idea what you're talking about. What do you mean? And I remember the partner saying, he's like, okay, let me ask you a question. He said, when you think of just computers, whatever, who do you think about? And at the time I said IBM, right? Because that was a recognized name. And he said, exactly. You don't think of the company that I represent. And he said, we kept hearing that over and over and couldn't figure out why. And I said, so why are you looking at me or schools and young people at my institution? He said, that's a great question too. He said, we can hire the best engineers from across the world, bar none, and they can build really great systems, but the clients don't like them. And so I must have had a question mark on my face, like, I have no idea what you just said to me. And he said, that sounds weird, doesn't it? And I said, yeah. Uh, and so he said that the key thing is the clients don't want them. The engineers thought they knew better than the client. So you're telling the client you know better, you know their job better than they know their job. They're not going to accept what you had. So he said, as an organization, we decided, you know what, we can teach you how to design, code, and all that, but we can't teach you how to interface with people, right? You either have it and it gets better over time, you mature and finesse it, or you don't. But we could teach all that other technology stuff. So he said, that's why we're coming to the best liberal arts institutions in the US and recruiting. And we're going to put you through rigorous training. And that's what I did. And so that's how I ended up in this field without any type of computer science or information technology degree. Because again, back then they didn't have them, right? That curriculum had not been created yet. The internet was just really starting to take off. There were no really established language or protocols for lay people, maybe the government and things like that. So it's a totally different business now. And even consulting or professional services, which is what I've been doing for X number of years, I won't say, that has really diversified too. There used to be only straight paths to partnership. Now there are all kinds of certifications. There are huge, as we all know, IT companies, right? We have Alphabet and all the other companies out there. So it's really come a long way at a relatively fast pace. So come full circle to where I am. I'll be with my current company. I'll be 19 years in June. And I've done a lot of different things, right? When I got recruited, I was recruited for my IT specialties and certain competencies. And then I moved into the C-suite. And my then CEO, he said, I want you to do this chief experience role. I said, you never say no to your CEO, but can I ask you what that means? I didn't really know what it meant. But unbeknownst to me, it was a role that had been around for at least 5 years at the time. And it was one in which you almost become the proselytizer for your company to make sure that the value and all things that define the company that it's really being perpetuated out there in the marketplace. But in most recent years, it turned on its head, and that was kind of 50% of the chief experience officer's time. The other time was really focusing on your colleagues and really making sure they're getting the training that they need, because in professional services, it's really about our certifications, right? We don't per se build things. We're not a product company. We will often implement and install and build out those tools. So you need to keep up with certain certifications. So I had a dual role, making sure my colleagues are really sourced properly and really had access to the tools to do their job. And then the other part was being out in the marketplace and really making sure they understood, the full scope of what our company could do. And part of that was philanthropy. So we've established relationships with some of the local colleges. We've established an apprenticeship and internship program, because we're believers, you can't be what you can't see, right? There are a lot of young people in Chicago that have never been downtown. They live on the south side of Chicago, the west side, and have never been down what we call the Loop, which is the heart of the business district. That just floored me. I really couldn't understand how that could be. But again, as a friend of mine said, you don't know what you don't know. So for us, in order to build wealth equity, people needed to have access to resources. And, the city colleges program we have here are all about that. They embrace the entire student, right? They want to make the environment one of learning and openness and understanding the entire student, right? Because when a student is in a classroom, and if they're the main provider, they're not earning money for their family, and they have to make that choice, right? So providing paid internships and apprenticeships allow individuals to be in the classroom, to get that in-classroom training, and then apply what they're learning in the classroom at the workplace. So we have them do that. And then often we will hire those students once they finish, so they become full-time employees. So they're able to see they did the certification program, did it successfully. While they were doing the certification program, they were doing hands-on work, and now they're an employee at that very company. And guess what? They can stay in their community, and they're spending the money in their community, right? So that money is flowing through. So you're building up the economics within, what I refer to as under-resourced opportunities, right? Because there are no jobs there, you can't go to school there. So the minute you get an opportunity, you up and leave. That doesn't do that community any good. So the fact that I can do that through work is great. I sit on a couple of boards and work with the colleges. And I've been able to write capstones. And for those that may not be familiar with that, it's almost like a project that allows a student to bring what they've done on the job, what they've learned in the classroom, and it culminates in one big project. And as I was telling you earlier, Megan, it's really about, there's no right or wrong answer, but really having them leverage their talent, their technology talent, their ability to work with people, to present and write, right? Because you get hired for your core competency, but more days than not, most of us would agree you're working in a group with people. So my belief is, I believe in tooling a student up, give them everything they could possibly need, so that when they walk in that door day one, they're confident that they can do the job and do it even better than maybe what people thought they could. So pretty fun.
But it's multi-layered, like you said, it's like that follow through. It's not just
correct.
Here's a course that you can learn XYZ, but there's like a next stage, and
Correct.
halfway to success, not to use it's such a common term, but like one that actually really works, and that you have them joining the firm.
Correct.
Right.
Exactly.
Cool.
So pretty cool. And then, being a part of a sorority and other organizations, I'm able to do that community work as well. And I'm really blessed that the organizations I'm affiliated with, they have a strong commitment to community. That's a cornerstone to every organization I'm a part of. And I don't know if I really knew that at the time. But I think that may have been a reason why I was drawn to them. I've been a member of my sorority for, it'll be 37 years, April 19th.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
So, and it's such an honor to be in an organization that is committed to paying it forward. I feel very blessed that I'm part of that community, and actually am able to tie it both personally, as you highlighted, and professionally, right? I mean, how often does that happen? You know? So, yeah.
There's a quote in your Notre Dame interview where you said, "When one climbs the ladder of success, you must hold it steady for those that come after you." And I wonder
Yeah.
if any one or two, whatever, any specific person or group or experience that helped you that you want to talk about, and I or any and on the flip side of that, um, and there could be privacy concerns, but anything you're working on in your multitudes of volunteering and committees that you're working on that kind of holds a special place.
I'll say, the company I work for, and obviously I won't say their name, uh, we're very supportive, right? I mean, I think they recognize that I brought something to the table because I had the benefit of working for quite a few big companies. And sometimes, when you're at a smaller company, you have to do a multitude of jobs, right? But fully felt the support of the executive suite in doing that because, we knew we would be successful together rather than apart, right? And I think that says a lot about an organization. I think many organizations are challenged. They became very challenged during the pandemic and George Floyd because they really didn't know who they were and they really didn't know who their people were,
Mhm.
that their people were people, right? They may come to work, do work 10, 12 hours, whatever, and then they go home. But if you really want the whole person, then you really want the whole person, right? The good, bad, and the not so pretty, right? Obviously, people want to get paid for the work they do, but they want to be valued. And there's no price tag to that, but it's recognizing that they're more than the designer or the programmer or whatever their role is, right? That there's something about them in addition to that core competency that makes them exceptional, right? And that's the human side, that you see them, that you recognize them, right? And you recognize their pain, that if someone may not be on their game, it's not just because they don't feel like coming to work that day. There may be something going on, right? Um, and I think that was the challenge during the pandemic where organizations had to pivot. They didn't know. They honestly didn't know. They, person came in, they put in their time, they, put their time card in and left. But now, we had people, I remember there was one of my colleagues that called me. He's like, they call me CB at work. He's CB, I can't come in today. I'm like, are you all right? What's the matter? What's the matter? He's like, literally, I have to defend my home. I don't want to leave it because of all the protests and riots. Like, literally, he was fearful of leaving his wife and his daughter. I was like, that's not even a question. I said, thank you for calling. So at least I know you're safe. Call me to let me know you're okay. But those were that's real life right there. And that, he respected me enough to let me know, but that, hey, you need to do what you need to do to protect your family. I mean, I'm sure that happened in many cities, bigger cities throughout the US during that, but it was kind of rough here in Chicago for a bit, you know. But fortunately, I would say our leadership, our governor and our mayor at the time really worked together, you know, and looked out for the citizenry, in that circumstance. But yeah, so, and it was then we had always really been good with folks, but we, put some additional programs in place as a company. We do things like Wellness Wednesday. We had therapists come in and talk to the team. We would go, we would go to zoos, like we would, hook up Zoom, and we would have like a person that worked with the animals to talk with them. And it was just a half hour every Wednesday, but it was a time for people to decompress and think about something else. And it was all done virtually, right? We put that in place. We have a person that's focused, that is kind of her responsibility to think about ways to get people to take that little time out every day during their work day and think about something else, right? So that was an example of putting the person first, not the employee, but the person, right? And so we had done a lot of that before the pandemic, but we really stepped it up because we weren't interacting with people. Pre-pandemic, we were interacting, right? So you could kind of read people. It's very hard to do that. I'm looking at you, right? But it's hard to see maybe what's going on behind that. People show you what they want you to see. And there were people hurting a lot, and didn't know how to work through that. And that's tough. So we made that front and center. We wanted to make sure people were safe and that people were healthy, right? And we can worry about the other stuff after, but that's the most important, and we put that front and center. And I think that says a lot about companies. But if you're not prepared to do that, if you didn't know who you were before, the pandemic just probably exacerbated that fact and rather help it, rather than help it. So, yeah.
Really
So
did.
I'd say that's probably kind of an example of just really, holding people up and blocking and tackling, if you will, right? In that respect. And I really do believe that and why people don't do it often, but it kind of goes to the fact of maybe we don't see people enough as people, but why should people make the same mistakes you do if you can potentially help them not to? What does that make you feel better? Like, because they should go through what you go through? I mean, that's not really flattering to me. And it doesn't really prove anything other than maybe you don't really care about people as much as you purport to do so. So, yeah, so that was real important. So,
It kind of feels like instinct to me that we should want better, not just for our children, but everybody's children. And
exactly.
like the prolonging of suffering is really not helpful to anyone. Richard and I were watching a Western show last night. I paused it at one point. I looked at him and I said, "Wow, when you kind of look at the foundations of this country, that was like 200, a little under 200 years ago. The time frame, it was like 1880 something, and they're like marauding west, right?
Right, right,
And there was a lot of murder and pillage and the whole,
right,
but it's also people like starting a new life. And I was like, when you look at the roots of what all that is, it's been framed a lot of times as like it's this big adventure and like come get your land. But I was like,
right,
so there's a lot of carnage. Like there's a lot of
right.
rough stuff to deal with.
Yeah, yeah.
And it kind of along with that, I was listening to something else earlier today. These two women were talking, and they said we think we're a storytelling society, but in a lot of cases we're story keeping. It's like,
Oh,
oh, this bad thing happened. And so they were specifically talking about the female
interesting.
experience of moving into middle age. But it's also like when we think about our history, we kind of want to put away the bad things and really focus on, the positives, like what came out.
Right,
But if we think of it in terms of storytelling and story keeping, we really need to be kind of telling that whole story, just like you were saying, like how much education, I don't know if we can like scream it to the rooftops loud enough, how much education and access to resources changes a person's life. Like
right.
in 2020, Jesha and I went in this, height of the pandemic, but we went and did this like girls' day trip to the beach.
Okay.
We're in the Central Valley, but the beach is about an hour and a half to 2 hours from where we live. So we drove out, and I was so happy. We got to the ocean, and I saw this group of kids, and I remembered someone telling me that they were organizing trips for kids from schools to go who had never seen the beach, like they'd lived
Wow. Right.
never been to the ocean. And all at once it came up to me. I'm like, I can't believe, like, to think that you live in this state and you've never seen the ocean. Just like you were saying, some kids had never seen the Chicago Loop, had never been,
Right.
maybe they hadn't been to the lake. And like, what a mind blowing thought,
Right.
right, about what you have access to. So just want to thank you because you've really taken your citizenry, right, and what that means to be a citizen and how much you can give back to others and
Right.
change the trajectory for other people. It's so
Right.
important, and just thank you for all that you
Oh,
do.
my pleasure. Thank you. Thank you. I feel really blessed, right? One, I have you as a sister, which is really, really cool. And as I said, I think you're the nicer of all of us. Just you're how you've always, from the time we met, you've always thought about the person, right? Not what they did, not who they said they were, but who they were. And that really is a gift. Not everybody does that. I just, and you've taught me, right? I think a lot of in our meeting and who you are and the parallels in our lives before we met have really forever impacted me in a good way, right? That, and like I said in the opening, I was so excited that you wanted me to do your podcast. I'm like, oh my God, what do I got? So I mean, the respect I have for you that you followed your path, I think is just great. It is so brave. It really, really is. And I don't say that lightly. Obviously I love you and I like you as a person, and you're always giving, because you feel the world can be a better place if maybe one more person just really sees the person in front of them, right? And the impact that that can have, right? And most of us will never know the impact we've had on people. But if you know you did the best you could when you could, hopefully that can be enough, right? So, whether you see the fruit, you see whatever you did come to fruition or not, you tried to be the best you could be at that time,
Mhm.
right? So,
You can do. Oh my
yeah.
gosh, we were talking about hair. You remember you like this, and this had a hair it's about half the size it was at that time. Uh, and she did my hair for me, and we went and got our nails done, and she took me to like her favorite stores, and I was just like, this is the most glamorous, amazing person I have
Oh,
ever met, and I can't believe we're related. So
oh,
yeah, it forever imprinted on me, and just yeah, and then our families, our husbands just totally click. I think they could spend, well, they do spend out whenever we do get together. I think it was something
right.
like 17 hours they spent.
I
Okay.
think only they could do that. I'm like, oh, and the stories. I'm like, yeah, that was definitely for you and Richard, like for sure. But again, they're really just cool guys. They don't try to be something they're not. We love them for who they are. They're great fathers. They're great people, but great men, right? That take pride in caring for and lifting up their spouses, right? I mean, I would dare say Curtis is probably my biggest cheerleader, right? And is just an awesome father. I mean, I just feel so lucky that we found each other, really, and have what it's we've been married for over 30 years, but we've been together for, give me a second, I gotta think of the math. It's kind of late on a Saturday. Let me think. Uh 35, 35 maybe? Is that right? Or maybe 35.
Wow.
So more than half, of our lives. And being African American, you don't hear those stories either, right? Of people staying together that, all in, doing what they can, providing for their family, not just monetarily, but emotionally and all those things. I mean, it takes, I think, an exceptional, person, whether, it's a man and a woman or two women or two men, that it takes effort on both sides to stay together and to raise a family and raise a healthy family, you
Mhm.
know, these days. I think it's even, dare I say, maybe even harder. But there are different dynamics, obviously, than, when our parents grew up and stuff like that. So, but, he, I look at him with our kids, and you and I talked about this a little bit before. I'm like, long after we're gone, they will have memories of what a great, he listened, he supported, he disciplines, he makes them think about things, he challenges them to their ideas, to read, to just not, live your life on sound bites. Do the homework, do the research. Don't say things because your friend said it or you saw it on TV or whatever. Just be curious, you know. So
Well, you've both shared with them when you say be curious. I love that because you've traveled extensively, 5 of the 7 continents, which blew my lid off. It's something we're traveling more now that
yeah,
kids are older, but because same like you, when they were younger, we wherever we traveled, we wanted to go with them, so we
yep,
couldn't
yep,
big extravagant trips when they were, or maybe considered. I'm using air quotes.
Right.
So we did more typical travels, but try to always take them when we could. But what are, I mean, you've been to so many amazing places. What are some of the, like, family or otherwise, maybe
Right.
you saw in community there, what you, I don't know. What are some of your standout memories of the places you've been?
I've been really blessed. So I have to say, I really enjoyed Taiwan. We had a college mate that was there, and he was about to come back to the States, and he's like, "This is your last chance." So we went there before we had children. But in December of 20, losing 21, yeah, 22. I'm trying to remember. Ooh. We went to Senegal.
Mm-hmm.
And for those that don't know, that was a point of no return. That when slaves were taken from inside of Africa, Senegal was one of the coastal cities. And so, we landed in Dakar, which is the capital, and we had to take a ferry to the island where the slaves would go. And there are still inhabitants. There are about, I think, 1,000 people that still live on the island. And maybe, I think, half Christian, half Muslim, right? Very proud, beautiful, amazing, happy people, proud people. And they built, I'd say it's probably like a museum to for people to come in and see what the slaves saw when they went on the ship. My oldest refused to go in. She got vibes. She's like, "Mom, I can't. I'll stand outside. You and Dad and my brother can go. I just can't." She was feeling the spirit. She said I couldn't. So I didn't force her. So we went in, and I knew that feeling she had. I was felt very uncomfortable in there for any number of reasons, but I wanted to see. So the conditions were so cramped. Like, the room, the I'm in my home office right now. Some of those spaces were not bigger than that, and they may have had, who knows, hundreds of people in a space. And there was a particular area they had where if the males misbehaved or acted up, they would put them in there, but they would have to bend over, and they keep them in there for like a month. So when they took them out, before they put them on the ship, they put them in a room so that they could stand up. But when they literally, for them to be in this other room for a month, they would have to be bent over. So their body just, there was no room in the space to stand erect. And that was the punishment. And the part that impacted me the most was, there was as you looked out on the ocean, there was a slit in the wall so that you could see the ocean. When the slaves went on the ship, that was the last thing they saw when they looked back. And what drove me absolutely crazy, and I didn't say anything, but there were young people just so anxious to take a picture. And there was a gentleman that worked for the museum. He's like, "Do you want to take a picture?" I said, "Absolutely not." I said, "This is not marketing. This is a humbling experience here, to think that millions of people left, perhaps thinking they might come back and didn't. Then that's the last thing they saw." I said, "I don't, that is a picture that will forever stay in my mind." Um, but I couldn't even imagine. And the fact that there are people that still inhabit the island and citizens, they work there, and obviously they deal with the tourists and stuff like that. They were just an amazingly group of proud, beautiful people. But yeah, it was, and why we picked Senegal, a very good friend of ours that lived here for many years always wanted us to come, and they knew, "Oh, we know you guys will travel." So he's like, come on over. And Senegal is not a tourist destination by any means. We went for the history. And where we stayed in Dakar, we literally only saw Africans. We saw very few foreigners, and the foreigners were, I think it was in the north part, which was more the resort area. Um, and people were very welcoming, very sweet. They probably knew we were Americans, right? But just felt exceptionally comfortable there. Curtis did I think he did the African ancestry, so he knows which countries he came from. I haven't done it yet because I have no. I know there's German in my blood based on our family name and things like that, but I'm gonna try to figure it out so when we go back, we can actually go visit the countries of our ancestors and things. But yeah, so we're fortunate that the children went with us and got to experience that too. So that was quite a moving experience and one I'll never forget. Very grateful that I was able to put my feet on the motherland, and experience that. It was beautiful. It was beautiful. But again, Taiwan's been beautiful. Blessed to have been to parts of Europe, as well. When I turned a certain age, and I won't tell everybody what my age was, but I went to Europe with my best friend, and that was a gift from my husband, and it was great. So I love the ability to explore, other countries and take in the food and the people and the culture. And I honestly wish more Americans had that opportunity to do it, because I think how we look at other countries and folks that come to the US, we'd have a different perspective. That they're just like us, they just happen to be from a different place and have different traditions, but no less desirable that they want the same for their loved ones, for their children, for their to prosper, and the only difference is we look a little different, but other than that, we want the same thing. So I'm just fortunate. So where I haven't gone has been Antarctica and Australia. So those are the two places. That's where I want to
That
go.
would be so good. I just saw a video of the middle passage, not the middle passage. That's because I'm still thinking about the door of no return. Oh my gosh, it's something else. It's the other passage where you go to Antarctica and you're on the boat, and it's like pretty rough seas for about 24 to 72 hours, I guess. But I follow this couple that's like going on these.
Wow.
So I was like, I think I want to do that. Richard's like, have fun. Australia too. We've talked about this for years, trying to do a family trip. I hope we can do that. And then the other thing for listeners, I wanted to share a book resource, and it's called The Door of No Return, and it's by a Canadian author named Dion Brand. And I read this last year. I think it came out in like 2020 or 2021, and there was like a webinar series with the University of Toronto where they kind of dissected it and went into it. But it's such a powerful book, and her premise is kind of like, where is the door of, she traces the history, but she also is like, where's the door of no return in the rest of the world? Like problems that started there have been transported, and it's just kind of, it's more of a poetic exploration of it, but so powerful.
Wow.
And the other thing, my friend Kule, who I mentioned before, who's in South Africa, she has this mission of us like getting together. She's like wants me to come to South Africa because she was sharing in her episode when she came on that a lot of Africans think of African Americans as just they're stolen people. And it's like they worry about this disconnect. Like everybody needs to get to the motherland at some point. Yeah. Like, so glad I got to plant my feet. And she's like, that's kind of the goal. You don't have to move back here if you don't want to or anything.
Right.
At least have that feeling of stepping foot in this place, which is not, as we know now, genetically the birthplace of everyone.
Right. Exactly. It there's nothing like it. And Curtis refused to go to Europe before he put his feet on the motherland. I went to Europe. He was like, I cannot. He said, I have to go to where I came from first before I start exploring, other places, with the exception of when we did go to Asia. But yeah, he said, I can't. I have to go to the continent. I have to put my hands, my feet on the continent before I go to Europe. And I totally respect that. And he stuck by that. So,
Beautiful.
Yeah.
As we kind of like, I know we've had a long day and a long chat, and I want to keep going. but I also want to respect your time and towards the end of your day because you're 2 hours ahead. Oh my goodness of me, and I keep thinking it's an hour, but it's two
Oh,
hours.
that's right. With this lovely time change, right?
It's getting longer. But kind of your well, maybe short term, long term, personal and professional goals because like you just got the MBA. You're doing
It's like take a breath. What are you gonna do? You know, for the age I am, and again, I keep saying I won't say what it. I think I have a lot of life left in me, and I really want to be able to continue to give. I would love to be the president or CEO, of a company that's very strong in whatever the core capabilities are. I have a love towards IT just because, but also has a very strong philanthropic arm, right? I do think they can coexist and should, because I really do think the success of the US as a whole is a collaboration of people, the educational systems, and the corporations, right? Because there's a place for everybody in that space. If you think about it, corporations need the people, they need trained individuals, and that's what the educational system does, right? So if those three can kind of figure out how they work together, think about equity, what that means, wealth equity in communities, that people can continue to live in their communities and pay that money in the community. So what had been or has been under resourced can be resourced, because now you have educated individuals that actually can have a standard of living in which they can provide for their families, send their children to school, and continue to build the economy. So it's not an impossibility. It's just whether people want to do it and they see the value of doing that. So I would love to be part, as I grow in my career, of a larger company that believes in that broader philanthropic footprint while still making money as a business, right? That can happen too. So it's not one or the other, or you can't have both of them. So I hope to be able to do that, and then on a personal note, continue to build on my input in the community, and hopefully pass that on to my children. My husband does it. He does it as an individual. He does it as part of his fraternity because he's in a fraternity as well. And we believe, Avery pledged my sorority, right? And very focused on community service. And I love that. And she said the reason why she did it was because of what she saw, right? So our kids are watching even when we don't think they are, right? And
especially
so, yeah.
there have been
So hope, yes, yeah. So hopefully to continue to do that in a bigger and better way, whatever that looks like, right? I mean, I love life, I love people, anything and everything having to do with people. And like I said, I'm blessed that I participate in organizations that is a cornerstone of what they do. So it kind of makes my want and need to do that a little bit easier, because I don't have to find it, it's there, so pretty nice.
um, I think it ties back in to that guy who came to Wesleyan and was like recruiting you, and it's like we can teach you the technical stuff. We need somebody who can and deal with, see, hear, take care of people, and
Absolutely.
that's just
Absolutely.
force in your life. And there's been so much divine guidance and
Yes,
and
absolutely. No, no doubt. No doubt.
all those blessings, and you give it right back
I
to
try. I try. Some days I'm better than others, but I just have a fundamental love of people, right? That uh, the whole pandemic was hard not being around people. It made me really appreciate how being with people energizes me, right? And that people give me so much that I need to give back. I just in order to thrive, and for me survive, it's just an important part of who I am and who I want and need to be. So yeah.
thank you
You're welcome.
for being my amazing sisters. I'm so
Oh,
proud to share your voice and your mission, and for opening up some personal things in your life as well as the business success. And I think it helps all of us to see the full roundedness of an individual, right? We're not just this job title, and we're not just that we have all these parts of our lives that make up the whole person.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having, like I told you, I was telling everybody, I'm going to be on my sister's podcast. So, I mean, again, I love what you do. And again, I love the authenticity of you. And you've always been that way for the time I've known you. Right. And, you know, I think it's just such a gift. I don't know if you realize how beautiful of a gift it is, because we often will try to be what we think people want us to be. And I think that's where the unhealthiness comes from psychologically, because you're not being true to yourself. So really, how can you be true and transparent to others? But you've challenged me, maybe even when you didn't realize it, that that's what I need to seek to be. So you've given when you don't even realize. So I love you for that and appreciate you for that. And I'm a better person for it, honestly.
Thank you. I love you too. And it's the same. I'm sorry for everybody listening. That's
Like there's a love that's going on here.
a little personal moment that honestly I think people will resonate with that. Listeners of the show, most of them know me personally. I think the people who listen in other countries, I'm not sure who you are, but I'm so glad you follow along, and I know there's going to be nuggets from this conversation, or I hope at least that you will pull into your own lives and appreciate, because here at My Yoga Audio we always say it's a great time for your mind and your body to be on the mat, but it's a theoretical and metaphorical yoga mat. So some of the episodes are about practicing yoga or meditation, and other times it's an interview, and we take these little insights and tidbits from these amazing people like Cecelia who come on board to share their wisdom and experience, because we are all human beings having a bodily experience, but we're spiritual beings too.
Right.
So
So,
until next time, friends, thank you so much for tuning in. And this is a wrap on episode 61. See you next time.